Aloha, good afternoon. It is 2:32 on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024, and I call the Committee on Housing Sustainability and Health meeting to order. I'd like to welcome Vice Chair Kia Aina, committee members Dos Santos Tam, Okimoto. I believe Councilmember Tobo will be joining us shortly, and then also welcome Vice Chair Kia Aina, or Councilmember Say rather, to the chamber. And Councilmember Cordero. Yes, mahalo, floor leader. Pursuant to Hawaii Statute Section 92-3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony remotely or in person in the council chamber on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. All persons who register to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by those who register to testify remotely. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. For those standing by remotely, please utilize the Zoom raise hand feature to indicate your desire to speak. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak, and I'll identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Before testifying, each person shall state their full name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at a remote meeting to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. I'll first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside the council chamber, which I don't believe we have at the moment, under HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audio-visual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you'll be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. And I'll reconfirm those if anyone joins us remotely. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones at this time. We have one item on agenda today, agenda item number 1, informational briefing on discussion of landfill siting with overview of February 2024 8th semi-annual report presented to the Land Use and Planning Commissions and potential concerns with siting at the Waipio Peninsula. I'd welcome to the chamber, I believe we have Director Babcock from Environmental Services and also Managing Director Formby. Appreciate you both being here. I think this is a good opportunity to just have an open conversation with some of the recent announcements. I know members in the community have felt somewhat distressed or concerned, and we just want to provide clarity and also give the community an opportunity to provide feedback. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Managing Director, and we'll defer on how you want to proceed. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Committee Chair Wire, Vice Chair Kia Aina, and Council members, Mike Formby, Managing Director. Chair, I took the PowerPoint that you provided my office and basically put responses to your questions on the same PowerPoint. So we can go through those slide by slide, and I believe you all have copies, and I can answer any questions that you may have. But first, I wanted to give just a little bit of background. And I think everyone knows that with the passage of Act 73 in 2020, the buffer zone law, that severely limited lands that would be available for a landfill. And then because of Red Hill, the Board of Water Supply, the Chief Engineer, Ernie Lau, imposed a no-pass zone, which further shrank available lands. And we then went to the military and asked the military if they had lands that might be available for the city and county. And one of the lands that was identified was the Waipio Peninsula Soccer Park. And that is currently under lease to the Department of Parks and Recreation. And so we've said all along that that is not our preferred choice, but it is a candidate. And because it's a candidate, it's something that we wanted to be very open and transparent about. I think it's important for everybody to understand up front that we do not have a green light for Waipio. In other words, the military has spent significant time reviewing the restrictions on that property, the use of that property, and how it might affect their operations. And they have not given us a green light yet, but we've still asked them to go through the process of seeing if it would be possible so that we would have one or more candidates available. And then I think you all know we've had this discussion. Councilmember Vice Chair Kia Aina spoke up about the lands at Lualualei, and the mayor made a commitment to the community that he would not site a landfill at Lualualei, and other military lands that were available were Waimanalo and Bellows, and clearly those violate Act 73. You're not within, I mean, you're within a couple of 100 yards of residential communities, Native Hawaiian residential communities, so that would be inappropriate as well. So our choices are slim at this point, but Waipio remains one until we receive information from the Navy one way or the other, whether it's green lighted or red lighted. So I'm happy to go through this report. Roger Babcock is here. Roger has the technical information, so if you have specific questions about landfills and the process that we went through, Roger can answer those, and I'll go through the PowerPoint.
Okay. I may ask if you want to kind of give, and I'll defer on how you want to use the PowerPoint. I'll note that it's identified and filed as Mayor's Message 58. We also have miscellaneous communication 151 from Senators Wakai Aquino and Representatives Chun and Lamosao. I was going to just ask if you could incorporate maybe the report that goes to the LUC and the Planning Commission. You could just give kind of an overview of what that entails, and maybe just an overview of what the contested case that's going on entails in terms of extending that deadline for finding a site. And then I think that kind of brings us into the conversation of where are the potential sites and then maybe the concerns with YPO, if that sounds okay.
Sure, happy to do that, and I'll ask Director Babcock to walk through the document that was produced by the Department of Environmental Services. But I think you all know that we did go to the Planning Commission, and we did ask for a 2-year extension because the original date for identifying a site was December 31st of 2022. And so I expect a decision. I don't think we have it yet, but I expect it any day from the Planning Commission, and that'll let us know what the timeline is for moving forward. But Director Babcock, if you want to share some of the information in the disclosure document to the Land Use Commission.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, MD. Roger Babcock, Director, Department of Environmental Services. A little bit more on the timeline. The Planning Commission does meet this month in April, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact date, to finalize their recommendation. That would then go to the state, to the Land Use Commission. They would have to calendar it, set up a hearing, and go through that process, do their findings of fact, and then make a recommendation. So that would be this summer sometime, probably, is an estimated timeline for the extension being granted. Yeah. So the question, Chair, was about what goes into the annual report. And so we actually have semi-annual reports that we give to the Land Use Commission, and that is part of the decision and order process from the permit extension from 2019. And so it does give, it gives us it gives a status update on the identifying new landfill sites. It gives a status update of landfill operations, compliance with all the conditions within the order, regulatory compliance, as well as important things like source reduction, alternate technologies, and landfill diversion, that we do. And so that is prepared every February, and the other, it's 6 months from there. August, I guess. Yeah. And so if you had any questions about anything in there, I'm happy to answer that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I might ask OCS if we can just, if we switch to testimony at this point and then come back to questions, that seems like they're shaking their heads. So before I open it up to questions, unless your preference was to go through the additional PowerPoint at this point, so I'll leave that up to you folks.
Yeah, I'm not sure it matters. Should we go through the PowerPoint? Okay.
So if we
And I'll just clarify for everyone too. So these are some questions that we sent over, and so stuff that I anticipate fleshing out. MD, I think, was very, appreciate the diligence that went in and just formulated in this way so we can have direct responses. Of course, I want to entertain questions from the entire committee. And so I probably will have follow-up in regards to responses to these, but maybe we'll have you go through the PowerPoint, and then I'll take testimony so we don't keep folks here all day. And then we'll open it up to a broader discussion, and I may have follow-up on the slides. And then, of course, I know some of my colleagues may want to ask questions as well.
Okay, so we'll go to the second slide. The second slide is Waipio Soccer Complex. Says it opened in 2000, cost approximately $23 million, designed to serve the 30,000 soccer players on Oahu and numerous others who schedule tournaments. What are the anticipated costs of relocating the facility? And my response was, we do not have an estimate at this time, as Waipio has not been approved for use as a landfill by the Navy, and no alternative soccer field site or sites have been identified. And the reason for the inability to estimate cost is that it really depends upon the topography of the alternate site. So if it was flat, it might be one difference than if it's hilly and requires infill. So we don't have a site, but at a minimum, I think you've extrapolated on the slide, adjusted for inflation, the 23 million would be 40 million in 24. So we think it would be in the range of probably 40 to 60 plus million dollars. If we go to the next slide, tsunami evacuation zone map. Wouldn't the surrounding inundation zone create access barriers, particularly during an emergency, or would access be accommodated through using eminent domain to acquire family residences? And then you provide the maps showing that the access routes are within the inundation zone. And the response was, if the Waipio property were made available by the military, there are a number of concerns and issues that would have to be resolved. We've had no talks about eminent domain. We haven't gotten far enough in this to actually look at viable solutions at all. And I don't think we would do that until the Navy or the military green-lighted that property for us. On the next slide, sea level rise exposure area and hurricane inundation. And you provided maps concerning the National Hurricane Center data, revealing that storm surge in the event of a hurricane could damage or block all of the access to the landfill and impact the city's disaster response. Concerned about sea level rise. The question was, wouldn't access issues arise from climate impacts, including sea level rise and potential large storms and hurricanes? And the response was, once again, assuming the Waipio property were made available, the city would need to assess these potential challenges to operations at the Waipio location. And that's absolutely true. I mean, everything that you're raising are valid questions and challenges, issues that would have to be resolved once the property was green-lighted. But because it hasn't been, we have not gotten that far. The next slide, special management areas. Wouldn't the use of a special management area be unjustified if other locations are available? And then you provide a map showing that the soccer complex is in an SMA zone. And the city also has to follow SMA laws. And so the truth is that because it's not available, we haven't looked into it, but if it was made available, that would be a consideration, and we would have to submit an SMA application to DPP and make it through the process. And whether or not we would do that remains to be seen, but you're right about that being yet another challenge. Next slide is surrounding area, and you list nearby areas as residential properties, Waipahu High School, Puhala Marsh Wildlife Sanctuary, and the Pearl Harbor National Wildlife Refuge. The question is, have the impacts on the surrounding community and environment been contemplated, particularly in light of the topography and inability to excavate? And the answer is the city is aware of the proximity to these properties of significance, and we commit to full public engagement should the military make the Waipio property available to the city as a potential option. And we are very concerned about the proximity to residential properties because of Act 73. And it would actually encroach on the current lease, and we would have to be outside that zone. And as far as Waipahu High School, we're very concerned about the proximity to that high school. So all of those things are important to us, including the wildlife refuge and sanctuary. And then I think the last slide was current setback requirement, Act 73. Portions of the parcel appear to fall within Act 73 setback requirements, and I believe that's true. And we would not need that entire acreage for a landfill at that site, so we would have to make sure that the portion that was identified for a landfill was outside of Act 73. And then I just put a summary there that the Waipio site is still not available to the city and county of Honolulu. It remains a candidate at this time. It's outside the no-pass zone. It's largely not within the confines of Act 73. The city filed an application with DPP in December of 2022 to modify the time period, which was December 31st of 2022, to identify an alternative landfill site. We're awaiting a decision. And any movement by the city towards designating the Waipio site as a landfill would go through a robust community engagement process. And we've made that very clear to everyone. We met this week with representatives of the Youth Soccer Association and told them the exact same position, and we've been open about this at town halls as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to come here and answer questions today, and Director Babcock and I can answer any additional questions you might have.
I appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to just have this conversation with our colleagues too. I know it is in Councilmember Toba's district, but of course all of us have varying degrees of familiarity with the Oahu. So I think talking through some of these challenges, I hope can be helpful and edifying. So before we take questions from council members, we'll go to testimony. We'll first go to in-person testimony. I believe we have Scott Keopui-Hiva registered. If you want to go ahead and proceed, identify yourself, and then you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Aloha Council members, my name is Scott Keopui-Hiva. I am President and Executive Director of Hawaii Youth Soccer Association. I've been before the council before on several occasions, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. I was not aware or had the luxury of seeing this PowerPoint until just now. So some of the points that I brought up in my written testimony that I submitted, as well as what I'm going to say today, may have already been addressed. But we as a soccer community, my organization specifically, but all of the youth soccer organizations are adamantly opposed to Waipio Soccer Complex becoming the next landfill for several reasons. We understand that the city has limited options to site its new landfill and agree that landfills should not be developed over drinking water resources. But we do feel that for several reasons, it should not be sited at Waipio Soccer Complex. The mayor established the selection criteria for the with the landfill advisory committee, and they brought up several points that they should be evaluated by, and several of those points have been disregarded, we feel. One was the landfill, the tsunami inundation zone. We feel that it was cited in the report that the Department of Health would refuse to permit it because of the tsunami evacuation zone, and that seems to be disregarded in this decision to possibly or consider Waipio. The other big point that we wanted to bring up is the use of developed land versus undeveloped land. It was mentioned in here that tens of millions have already been invested in Waipio Soccer Complex at its current site. Why would we consider moving it, spending more money to build another soccer complex to make a landfill where we've already invested infrastructure and so on? Again, we appreciate the time to make our feelings known, and we will be following this issue. But again, we'd like to state our opposition to using Waipio and feel there are other options that should be pursued further. So thank you.
Mahalo, thank you for coming down. Were there any questions for the testifier? Okay, see none, thank you for your time. If there's anyone else in the gallery wishing to testify, you can come up to the microphone and identify yourself by stating your name, and then you can proceed when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Council Chair and members, Council Chair of this committee and members of the Council. My name is Frank Doyle, and I'm representing the Hawaii Soccer Association. I'm a director at that association. You know, YPO has been in blood of children and adults for at least 20 years now, and it's going to be hard to get that out. Many of them are very emotional about the decisions that maybe come down, and their lives have been improved by this facility in many, many ways. Just having the number of people that we have had out there go through the process in the past 20 years has certainly contributed to the welfare of the people on the island with regard to not only their health, but I like to think about the fact that we've kept so many kids out of drugs. So we're kind of emotional about some of these things. I think Scott alluded to a couple of things that we feel probably could be looked at closer. Certainly the committees, the landfill committees, advisory council that went through and made the report. Some very good people on that. And the thing is, at the end, we're still stuck. We're stuck with Act 73, as everybody knows. But we're also stuck with what are we going to continue to do with our present facilities, as well as where are these alternatives. So we just hope, understanding the city is in the process, that we're able to get through this as quickly as possible and get rid of the emotional portion of it. Although I do think that we will continue to voice our opposition to YPO being a landfill. Thank you.
Mahalo, any questions for the testifier? Councilmember Tupola.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm not sure which AYSO person, but you know, we did meet with Department of Parks, and I think you guys have a huge tournament coming up this summer, is it?
Yes,
that you guys are?
I think
Yeah.
Scott can speak to that. It's his tournament.
Yeah, just a real quick question about it, since you're here.
Scott.
Is that okay, Chair? I'll just finish it.
Please, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know if things got better. I know that, you know, the conditions at the field needed to be improved in various areas. You don't have to give me a long answer, but did things get better with the parks?
Let's say it's a work in progress.
Okay.
There's some progress. It's got a long way to go.
And you're hosting a huge tournament when?
Yes, the Far West Regionals will be held June 21st to 27th
Ooh, it's
at
right
YPO
there.
Soccer Complex. We're about 2.5 months out. And honestly, there's some dirt spots on the fields. There's some big dirt spots that we need to have resolved.
And how many people do you expect at this?
We're expecting 200 teams from the mainland, roughly 4,500 players, coaches, referees, and then all of their families and spectators. So this could easily be 7,000, 8,000 visitors that will be here for that tournament.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize, you know, what kind of organization and what level you guys are running at, because that's why this complex is so important for events just like this, not just for the youth on our island, but because of how much economic, you know, drivers are going to come in with this tournament. Absolutely.
That's one of the things that we treasure about this complex is it's been around for 20 plus years. We've hosted, this will be the 5th time we've hosted this event, and it's had an estimated economic impact of $10.5 million each and every time. So we're very happy. We love the soccer complex, and we're, like Frank said, we're emotional about it. We don't want to see anything happen to it.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate that.
Councilmember Dos Santos, Tim.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Doyle. I understand that you have actually a great deal of experience in the environmental services and refuse field, and so I think your comments about the difficulties of siting a landfill here in Waipio Peninsula, we should definitely, that should weigh heavily on all of us. Could you share a little bit about your background in this field?
Well, I worked for the city for 42 years, and most of that was as chief of refuse for the Department of Environmental Services, previously known as the Public Works. And I also served as the Director of Environmental Services. Landfill siting is one of the most difficult things you could probably get into. I mean, the emotions associated with that are far more than what you're going to find from us in the soccer community for the soccer park. I mean, it really gets quite heated, and fortunately, we've been able to do what we did. And I think the biggest things that contributed to allowing us to be able to have the landfill, and I believe one of the best soccer waste management teams to take care of the rubbish in our city, is what has happened over the past years since 1980, when we started looking at H-Power and what that has to do with saving landfill space. And if it wasn't for that, we'd be in here a lot earlier just trying to figure out where we're going to put all of this refuse. So it's really important that the facilities that we presently have continue to operate as best they can. And they're doing quite well, actually, I think. Although I've not, been around, I got to say that I've kind of stayed away from the situation until this came up with the soccer park. But we do have alternatives probably that would raise a lot of emotions. I know everybody's concerned about where we go towards Y&I, and I understand that. Just the road situation by itself is intolerable. We're lucky we have a good road up to where we are today. But beyond that, that's a problem. But it's a problem that has to be addressed, because while we look at alternatives and while we don't want it at the YPO Peninsula Soccer Complex, some of these other alternatives are going to be very hard to obtain. And I'll leave it at that, but it's one of the most difficult things facing our present environmental director, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. If there's anyone else in the gallery wishing to testify, you can come up, state your name, and proceed when you're ready.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sergio Bolioli. I'm the current president of the Hawaii Soccer Association, as well as a MISO, Major Island Soccer Organization, as well as a representative for U.S. Club Soccer in Hawaii. I don't want to sound redundant, so I agree with everything. I agree and support everything Scott and Frank just said. I have all the same ideas and same things that they just brought up in mind, so I don't want to just keep beating a dead horse. Couple of things I'd like to point out. Like, the three of us have been involved with YPO Soccer Park even before it became a park. Like, Frank was the mastermind behind the whole plan a long time ago. Then Scott and I have been involved, with all the developing of the park, like a year or two before the park actually opened. So we've been around for a long time. And, we feel like that's part of our child, to the point that, Scott just mentioned about the tournament that's coming up this summer, and for which all the soccer groups, all the associations have gotten together to help ensure that the park's in the best condition, to the point that we've been buying equipment, for the park. We also been spending money on buying materials for the park manager to be able to do a few projects to improve the conditions of the field that Tupola just brought up, So we hate to see all this, everything that we're doing to do our part to make the park even better suddenly, go bye-bye, go to waste. So that's the only thing I want to add it. But everything they said earlier, I would say same thing. I just want to repeat myself, but thank you for your time and understanding.
Yeah. Mahalo for your testimony. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've not seen anybody, but if anyone else in the gallery is wishing to testify, you can come up and state your name. Otherwise, we'll go to online. I don't believe we have. Madam Clerk, is there anyone registered or unregistered online?
Chair, there is none.
No, okay. Mahalo. So appreciate everyone coming down, and hopefully feel free to stay for as much of the conversation as you can. We'll go to questions from council members, and so Council Member Toba, the area council member, we'll throw it over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing up this discussion. And thank you, Managing Director and Dr. Babcock. Realistically, if we move forward with using federal military lands, how long do you anticipate it will take to negotiate the land transfer and the process all the necessary permits to open a new landfill? Basically, from the time you identify the landfill to the opening of the new landfill, we will be able to open the new landfill by March 2028.
So Councilmember Tolba, thank you for that question. The short answer is I don't know for a fact what the timeframes would be, but I would tell you that the normal planning horizon for a landfill is 8 years.
Yeah.
So this actually would have had to start in 2020, and it didn't. So we didn't know what the landfill advisory committee would come back with. We frankly thought they would make a recommendation. But after receiving the input from the Board of Water Supply, they did not make a recommendation, which put us in a position where we had to go for the extension from the Department of Planning and Permitting. But the truth is, we think we all understand, and in being frank and honest about this, that the time frame for doing that within the Waimanalo Gulch, deadline established by the LUC would be challenging. But I'll tell you that it depends upon the site that's eventually identified and what it looks like. So the more sites like this that are around the potential site, like refuges and no blast zones and FAA flyover areas, the probably longer it's going to take.
Yeah.
But if we can find a location where we don't have as many challenges, the goal would be to expedite the time frame so that we could try to make the 2028 deadline.
Yeah, but realistically,
Not good.
yeah, well, I've been there for 4 years and I've never seen things finish on time. So my question is to Director Babcock. He has stated that the Waimanalo Gulch, and I said this at the last hearing, has the capacity to continue to collect ash and waste until 2036. But we, again, must close by 2028. Is there any option to extend the use of Waimanalo Gulch? And if anyone has ever been out there, the people working out there do an amazing job. And they basically said that it could go for another 20 years. So,
Yeah, so good question, council members. So the date that you cited is the latest information that we have. So every year we have an operating contract, Waste Management. They do a flyover and they give an airspace estimate, which is what that is, and it estimates how much additional capacity there is within the confines of the permitted space that's there. And so that is the correct number.
okay, so are the private lands that are suitable for a landfill, have you guys searched that? And if so, is the city looking into, again, we talked about even this, like, because we have this open conversation, I just want to make sure, I know there's probably people watching compared to the last time we had the discussion. So is the city looking into private land as an alternative?
Yes, yeah, thanks for that question also. So yes, we have, as part of the landfill siting efforts that have been going on since Frank's time and before, there have been various committees and commissions put together. Our latest one was able to use all of the prior information, so all land space on the island has been evaluated. And the thing that changed was Act 73, which really excluded, there's a separation distance of a half mile between residential property, schools, hospitals, and that eliminates a lot of land. So basically all the private lands. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's only when you add in the no pass zone that you eliminate all of the interior space, which is, there's private lands, there's ag lands and stuff like that that are.
Okay, so if if you could find a suitable private lands, what kind of costs are we looking at generally? And could you give us an estimate of what this cost would be?
Yeah, so the working number that we used while we were, when we've been doing our investigations was we had stuck in a number of $200 million for procurement and initiation of a landfill.
So 200 million.
200 million, yeah.
200 million, and, we just got through a parks meeting, and Councilmember Kiaina talked about the shortage of parklands. It's concerning because you're looking at the impact of over 30,000 soccer players monthly. So we're looking at, you're saying 40 to 60 million. Would this probably lead to raising taxes to find that money?
I don't think we can speculate on that at this
Okay.
time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for having me. Aloha, Director.
Aloha.
You know, we've had so many conversations about this, and I definitely want to stand up and just voice the same concerns for my community, that we do not want it to continue at the location where it's at. And that's what we're talking about today, which is where would it go? So 2 of the questions that came up in the town hall with the mayor and Kapolei was, 1, if you guys are pursuing any waste to energy goals, meaning to decrease the amount of needed landfill space, period. And 2, what are you guys doing to pursue any ash? Because a lot of it is ash going from H-Power into the landfill. So are we using, ash in a different form? At this point, I feel like our options for reciting it are slim to none. I'll be honest, slim to none. I haven't seen one that I actually feel like, oh, it could actually work, because most of the ones that are being suggested are either 1, needing to be in laws that need to be amended, or 2, needing to have federal approval, which is very rare for us to even get. So let's be honest, more likely than not, it's going to be right where it is. That's what I think. And that's why nobody in Waianae is getting super excited about this, because we don't have a site, which means it's just going to stay there. So what are we doing for waste to energy, and what are we doing for ash?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So waste to energy, of course, is what H-Power is. And there are other ways to do waste processing. What we have is H-Power, and H-Power has been in operation since 1990. So it's an aging facility. Half of it is from that date, and the newer part is from 2012. So that's a much newer part. So it requires constant, maintenance and refurbishment and things like that. But it does waste energy. There are, what we get is ash out of that. So currently that's mostly what goes to Waimanalo Gulch is the ash. And we are in the process right now of doing an ash recovery project, which is a big project that is currently in the permitting phase for the ash recycling, the ash product recycling. So this is we would be, one of the leaders in the nation in terms of the ash recovery once this project is completed. What it does is it takes the existing ash and it further processes it to remove additional metal, because we do metal recovery from ash presently. All waste energy facilities do. But this is an advanced metal recovery, multiple different kinds of metal, not just ferrous metal. And then in addition to that, it takes the remaining material and makes a sand substitute product, a sand-like product. It's not just sand. There is some sand in it, but some of the other stuff that ends up in ash is glass and other things. But that is done in other places, and it can be used in asphalt pavement. So that would reduce the ash amount by at least 60%. So there'd be less, be half as much ash. So speaking just in terms of ash, that would essentially double the life of an ash disposal site by recovering more than 50%. So that's very important, really important project for us that we're pushing forward. With respect to other technologies, there are other ways to do things, but they're not necessarily better. They are different. Most processes do have some residuals of some sort. They have emissions too, generally, like H-Power does. And in addition, any type of waste conversion process doesn't run 100% of the time. So there are scheduled outages for maintenance, for example. So
Totally, yeah.
It's a giant industrial facility. It has to be taken out of service for major maintenance every year. And during that time, nothing is being processed. You have to have an alternate, disposal method, which, and generally you size the operation so that you can process the amount of waste that you get per day. You don't have usually a lot of extra capacity. So meaning when you're shut down for 2 weeks, you couldn't make a big pile of stuff and then somehow process that really quickly after you were back online because you don't have that extra capacity. It's just not cost effective to build a bunch of extra capacity. So that's kind of the gist of the waste to energy, I think, question.
Yeah, I'll just ask one more. And to be honest, thank you for mentioning that it can be used for asphalt. I brought it up before that a lot of the ash could be converted into usable material that we could then have less that we need to put in a landfill. Again, to your point, we're probably never going to get to zero, but less of the residue is what we're looking for. Are the flames at H Power able to capture that and put that into energy as well? So waste to energy is us bringing our trash, burning it at H Power, but this isn't my district. So the flames that are coming up, can't we also use that for some form of energy as well, or no?
I'm sorry, Council Member, what part are you saying?
So in H Power, we bring our stuff there, they burn it. You guys have 2 of the stacks where flames come up, right? Because you guys are burning the material.
Right.
Is there no way to capture the gas emissions and also use that for energy?
I see what you mean, yeah. So the heat, for example.
Yes.
So, yeah, well, so H Power is essentially a power plant. I mean, it's really there for us to reduce the volume of our
Understood.
refuse. But it's basically a power plant, not very different from a coal-fired power plant or an oil-fired power plant. So basically, you have the combustion material that you can combust, you ignite it.
But can it be used for energy or not?
Yeah, it is. So that is what's used for the energy. So the hot gases, the flame and the hot gases are used to to boil water. Additional heat could be recovered, but I think the efficiency generally wouldn't be there. So what
Understood.
we're releasing with the stack gases. Yeah.
I mean, because I have another right in Kalailoa, it's a private business, but they capture everything, every bit of energy that's up in there, they capture it and use it again. So all I'm suggesting is that while we're in this interim period, one, that we pursue better ash recovery like 1,000% faster than we're doing right now, because this is our only way forward, really, to be honest, to decrease the size of the landfill. Mm-hmm. 2 is that we still don't even capture the gas emissions from Waimanalo Gulch. So when we put trash into the ground or whatever we're putting in the ground and these gases are coming up, we can actually capture that energy as well. I've talked to you about this, and I know we're not set up in the city yet to do that type of gas capture, but we could. So I think as we contemplate where it's going to go at whatever year that happens, we need to already be doing better at what we're doing now. And you're an expert. So I know you know all these things, but whatever we can do to support, to increase our ability to do better ash recovery, as well as capturing any emissions that are coming out of Waimanalo Gulch or out of H Power, so that we're better using every ounce of energy or of gas emissions that's coming up that we could probably even turn back into revenue. I mean, I met with Hawaii Gas, who said they could possibly turn in all the gas emissions from Waimanalo Gulch into revenue. So is that something we could pursue?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thanks for bringing up Waimanalo Gulch. So landfills emit methane if from the rubbish that's buried there, not from the ash, but from the rubbish that's been buried there in the past and when we have to divert. We do capture all the methane. Landfills are required to do that. It's captured, and currently it's flared, it's burned, and so it's wasted energy. We have an RFP that will be on the street very soon. I've been working on it for a long time, which will be to award a contract to capture the gas and either turn it into energy or turn it into some other saleable product. Yeah.
Yes, I've been waiting for that contract.
It's been in the works a long time, but it's just about on the street. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
No, and great points. Actually, very necessary, because if we only have one location, that means where we're going to put it after that, because obviously we have to be setting policy that is mindful of all the generations that are going to come after us. Councilmember Dos Santos, Tam.
Thank you. I wanted to build actually upon the question from Councilmember Tupola. Director, could you explain the metal recovery process? How do we remove metals from the waste stream, particularly those more heavy metals, especially now that we have more electronics? And I understand that the city also recovers those and sells those. And obviously that's a good thing if we can get it out of the stream and make a little bit of money along the way. But if you could explain that process to us, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So it's about metals and metal recovery. So H-Power is really two different facilities. There's a refuse-derived fuel facility, which is the original facility. It has 2 boilers, 1 turbine, 53 megawatts of generating power. That does pre-processing of the waste, which involves shredding, metals recovery, and then it goes into essentially into the burner. So there's magnets that are used to recover ferrous metals, and then there's what's called eddy current separators, which separate aluminum materials. Then after that, the ash, so that doesn't recover everything. There's some recovery percentage, and then other metals end up in the ash. The ash then is processed again with magnets and eddy current separator to remove more of those metals. So basically we recover just ferrous and aluminum. The enhanced facility will have additional metals recovery. And I visited a facility, and there's one, it's in Pennsylvania, and they have, they recover a lot of different kinds of metal, including coins and stuff like that. And some of it is work that's done by hand. Otherwise, there are magnets, but then magnets are only for ferrous metals. So other types of metals, there's other ways that they're removed. And a lot of it involves, there's screens of various types, and it's actually, kind of similar to a quarry producing aggregate. There's processes that are used for at a quarry for making different sizes of aggregate, sand, and other things like that. And so by processing it through several different processing and washing, they're able to recover a lot more metal. And that does have value. The current metals that we recover, I believe at H-Power is worth about $4 million a year.
Appreciate that, Director. Can we go to the slide with the tsunami inundation zone? And so I know this came up in testimony earlier. So maybe could you first walk us through what the Landfill Advisory Committee, their role was, concisely maybe, because I know we have stuff to talk about. But
yeah.
And I only ask because someone had mentioned how Site 11 was eliminated in their evaluation, or I might be wrong on the number, but the peninsula itself below the soccer complex, because that was in the tsunami inundation zone. So
yeah,
maybe before we dive into this, could you just kind of walk through what the LAC did and what they're all about?
Yeah, happy to do that. Happy to give you guys a little refresher. So in 2021, Landfill Advisory Commission was formed, call it the LAC, and by the mayor, and invited folks to be on this on the committee. They worked through June. The final report was in June of 22. And so their role was to evaluate sites that ENV gave to them based on the prior reports, and the big change was Act 73, residential restrictions. And so they incorporated all those things in there and essentially gave them a map, which is available on the website, and it shows areas where all of the restrictions allow those spaces. And so then they went further and identified several sites within those spaces and asked the Landfill Advisory Committee to evaluate those. They came up with a bunch of different criteria and scored all of them and came up with a ranking. And one of them is the tsunami inundation zone. That is one of the restrictions that has always existed, even before Act 73. That hasn't changed. And so there is a tsunami inundation map that the state has, And so that's what's reflected, in this diagram. And so I think what you're referring to is that there is an area in the middle of the Waipio Peninsula, the upper part, which is not in the tsunami inundation zone. And that's shown in green there. The lower part of the peninsula is where it's yellow or yellow, light green kind of color, is in the tsunami inundation zone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate that clarification, because I know it came up earlier in the testimony as well. And of course, the report came out in 2022, and their recommendations, essentially I saw two recommendations. It was look at federal lands and look at amendments to Act, is it 73?
73, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming that looking at federal lands and looking at amendments to Act 73, given that those were the two recommendations from the committee, would be what the city's doing. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's correct. I would just mention that they made recommendations. Well, one of the things to mention is the reason they made the recommendation about federal lands, including Waipio Peninsula, was that those were not considered. They were not part of the process. So we did not include federal lands in the lands that the Landfill Advisory Committee evaluated. And they actually made a third recommendation to look into, which was to think about eminent domain to possibly, if there was possibly some land where eminent domain, buying some private property could, that is within the half-mile buffer, could maybe free up some land that would otherwise, that would then meet all the requirements.
Okay, and just to distinguish, because I know there's been a clear indicator we're not going to do eminent domain, or that's not being looked at, but there's always potential for acquisition. Like eminent domain isn't necessarily the only option, right? I mean, that's the legal action of government, instituting a filing in the circuit court and starting the process to condemn land. But that we're not precluded from going out and trying to buy land, right?
Correct. We could buy land potentially, yes.
Yeah, just generally. Mm-hmm. And again, I mean, I think it's self-explanatory, but Managing Director.
Committee Chair, I just wanted to clarify. I want to make sure we're not eliminating eminent domain across the entire island. That map was eminent domain for the access points to the Waipio Peninsula. But eminent domain is still a power that the city, within limitation, can exercise and might have to do in addition to the ability to acquire. So I didn't want anybody to think that the comment about eminent domain had not been entertained. That was for the access points to Waipio Peninsula. I
appreciate that, because I think there was ambiguity in the instructions given to the LAC, also some ambiguity in the Planning Commission discussions on the record. And so that's just good for me to hear that.
Right, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a city power that could be used, but it's not being contemplated here. Right. So appreciate that. Just to kind of, I think the concern is clear, right? Right now we have the roads on both sides, and then you look at where the non-inundation zone is, right? On the far left side is the Visayan Community Association. I know we all did the HC and went down there, and then the rest is all residential, right? Okay, can we go to the next slide? And not pertaining to the slide, and I might direct it to Director Babcock, but could you maybe just describe, as an example, so we get a hurricane, bunch of debris is out in the street. What's kind of the process? Like, the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, is activated. We have multiple city departments. What's going to proceed as the city begins its emergency response?
Yeah, so, the best person to address that, of course, would be Director Hiro Toya to talk about that from DEM. But we're somewhat familiar with how that works. Go ahead.
And I can just narrow it, I guess.
Yeah.
So, because, of course, understanding the scope of their role in terms of overseeing, but then just operationally maybe from like an EMV perspective, what would EMV's role be?
Yeah.
Once the debris is pushed into the parks, to clear the road, folks' roofs and, all kinds of stuff. What kind of proceeds from there?
Yeah, so there's a debris clearance aspect, and DFM will be doing some of that. EMV wouldn't be doing debris clearance, but we do manage the debris clearance contract. There's a contractor which will be activated, in such an emergency. They would have temporary debris locations where they would be putting debris just to clear the roads, like you say, and a place where it could stay for a period of time till it could be further processed. Generally, the further processing is it would go to a landfill. And that would depend on what space is available, how much debris there is, and things like that. There would be some things that could be burnable, that could go to H-Power. But again, the challenge with using H-Power would be H-Power is running at full capacity to take care of the rubbish. And so there's not that much, additional capacity where we could just really process really a lot of extra material. So it would need to be landfilled. So generally, that is one of the reasons why we have to have a landfill.
Okay. And I appreciate that, and I think it kind of underpins my concern with having the only access to the landfill be through a low-lying area subject to inundation, in the event of large storms where we may need to use it, right? I mean, both when the water comes in and then, the damage to the access points. So I just have a couple more questions. I'll throw it out, though. Are there any other questions at this point? Councilmember Toba.
So you mentioned that it would normally take 8 years to move forward when building a new landfill in 2024. Is the administration going to seek the option of extending the use of the Waimanalo Gulch beyond 2028?
Councilmember Toba, Mike Formby, Managing Director. So we have not made that determination at this time because we think it's premature. And the reason for that is I think the technologies are changing year by year, and we still need to look at Act 73 and whether or not there is the possibility of amending that. And it may be that their sites are available that do not require the full 8 years to, use as an alternate site. So I think, as Councilmember Topola said, most people do the math and realize that at some point we're going to have to make that decision, but we're not making it at this time.
Again, I think from the last hearing, I had mentioned that we have to, I think, maybe do a better job at educating the public on the things we can do to really recycle. We have mulching now, the green waste. We do a fairly good job at burning our trash. And, hopefully we'll get a better job at even recycling our plastics a little bit better. So, okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tupola.
Thank you. 2 questions. So, Chair Wire was talking about 2 things. One was federal land, and the second thing was lands that are within Act 73. And I understand what MD just said, which is if the Act ever gets amended, but we don't know that we have federal lands and we're still pursuing some type of investigation on a federal land. So what pieces of land are you guys investigating within Act 73, if any?
So Councilmember Topola, Mike Formby, Managing Director. We're having initial discussions and doing an investigation, but we're not disclosing those potential locations right now because they are private, and we do not want to in any way diminish the potential value of those lands. So we're being very careful in our discussions. I will tell you that in order to go after a private parcel, we would have to amend Act 73. And I've already had discussions with some legislators at the state, and they've advised that that would be a very difficult process, but they haven't eliminated it. So we're trying to go through the process of eliminating the low-hanging fruit first, which then forces us to the tougher decisions that we have to make. But at this time, for us to identify private lands that we've looked at and have actually met with some of the parties would probably potentially diminish the value of that land, and we don't want to do that.
Understood. And while you're there, I previously had talked with Director Babcock about the landfill advisory committee or commission that we convened, and if we didn't go with any suggestions, if we would throw it back to them or throw it back to an advisory committee. Now, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because nobody in my community knows where to put their voice. Do they put it here? Did they put it at the planning commission? Because there was a meeting today at 1:30. Everybody's texting me, I got to go to this commission meeting, but that was about the lawsuit that they're handling. So it's difficult for my community to know where to advocate, and I'm just suggesting that having it in a form where there's a forum, whenever you guys get to the point of suggestions, we're gonna need to put it in an area where public can insert their voices and not at the ultimate hour when we're already ready to acquire a property. What is your thoughts?
Councilmember Topola, I agree with that. And we were committed to robust public engagement. So I commit to you that when we're at the point where we make a decision that, let's say when the Navy tells us that we can no longer look at Waipio Point, if that's what they tell us, then we're going to have to move to the next option. And that's going to require that we set up some sort of process to identify what those options are, because I don't think it's going to be just one.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be multiple. And we're going to have to engage the communities, and we're going to have to go to the legislature and look to amend Act 73, or we're going to have to talk to the Board of Water Supply and the public about whether or not they think the technology exists to actually put an ash-filled landfill over the aquifer. I mean, I think there's many things that we can do, but those get increasingly complex. And so we're trying to eliminate the low-hanging fruit first, or get options that we can do at this point. But I agree with you, we will have a forum and we will give the public a place to go, and I'm not going to push that on the council, it'd be on the administration.
Yeah, I appreciate Chair Wire having this conversation, but we chose the landfill advisory committee members because of their background. The lady who represented ours, she's been in our neighborhood board for 20-something years, and so we wanted a committee that had some background in this issue, but also we wanted to let people know these are the regular times they're meeting, this is how you can testify, this is how we're discussing it. So thank you for saying that. Was there any outcome at the 1:30 meeting today about the lawsuit for the landfill?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last question.
So the Planning Commission took up the lawsuit on the landfill right now, and the 1:30 Planning Commission, was there any outcome that we should share with our communities?
I haven't heard yet.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chair.
And that's a great question. I think they went into recess right before we started the meeting, and I know MD and Director were over here. Oh, I lost a cable. I don't know what that connects to. Were there any other questions, Chair Waters?
Thank you so much. What is currently put into the Waimanalo Gulch Sanitary Landfill? I took a tour a couple of years ago. It looked like it was just ash, but for the record, what is the city putting in there?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Chair Waters. Yeah, so all the ash from H-Power goes there, and I'll find you here the number in just a second. That's about 60,000 tons per year, I believe. Let me just find it.
I'm sorry.
55,000 tons per year of ash, and then there's other things that cannot be burned at H-Power, either per our permit or for other reasons. Go directly to the landfill. So some of those things include what's known as auto shredder residue, ASR. So that's from all the cars that are junk cars on the island, are processed and recycled, essentially. During that process, they're extracting fluids and metals and plastics and things like seats and fabric and stuff like that. And that lighter, fluffy stuff that's not metal and then the plastic together is called auto shredder residue. That comes from Schnitzer Steel. I believe they're the only company that does that on the island. And they recycle that material. So the ASR is, we're not permitted, it's not permitted to burn that. It is, it's a lot of plastics and material that emits toxic chemicals, so it's not burned at H-Power. So that goes to the landfill. And there's
Test.
Aloha, we're reconvening the Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health meeting after a brief recess due to technical difficulties. I don't believe there were any other questions except Councilmember Toba, so we're gonna wrap up with the mic, so I'll pass it over.
Awesome, thank you. All right, in terms of the Waipio Soccer Complex, is there anything concerned constituents can do to ensure that the site is not selected as a landfill?
Yeah, thanks for that question, council member. There will be a robust public process if the site is identified, there's then a long process of going through an environmental impact statement, which will involve public hearings and testimony and reports that will be able to be commented on and things like that, public meetings. So I think there's going to be ample chance for public input on any site that we identify. Thanks.
Okay, mahalo for that, and mahalo committee members. I'll just make one last announcement that zoning committee will reconvene tomorrow, Thursday, April 4th at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Okay. Yeah, and so we'll be adjourning. Appreciate all the conversation, appreciate the community members that came out today, and it's an ongoing conversation, so please reach out to your council member if you had continued thoughts on this process. We're now adjourned.